Hey there, welcome to another Path of Exile guide. It's a new episode of scrambling to find a good League starter build, the Autumn edition. Well, I'm here to help you with that and throw another 5 options into the ring so you can really double down on that analysis paralysis. But really now, having extra choices is good, even if only as a backup if your first pick turns out to be bad. Which is a distinct possibility when you factor in the new passive tree and the masteries along with all the changes to defense systems and all that stuff. So for each of these builds I completely revamped the passive tree, including the act by act leveling trees, adjusted class of jewels and gem setups as needed. For example, certain supports no longer made sense or were weaker than others with the new tree, and made sure each build has enough defense using the new tools. Now in the next couple of days I'll keep tweaking and min-maxing all my builds that are still viable, and will also work on my personal League starter build as well, so if you're curious about this or have any questions about any of these builds, you can drop by my stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/navandis. Okay, number 1, the fresh out of the oven Generous Cry Shield Crush, my absolute favorite build from 3.15. It's an incredibly easy to play build with amazing real apply damage that doesn't require targeting or any setup. You just spin around and mash the Warcry button and your Mirage Warriors will do the rest. This gives you the freedom to focus entirely on keeping your character alive and moving out of nasty stuff in boss fights. And if you're a new player or less experienced, that's a huge advantage as you can actually start learning the boss moves and mechanics this way. Now, this build can go way beyond the League starter phase and well into the endgame as you keep upgrading its gear. It has a very high ceiling and I've used it to run pretty much all the available content in 3.15. Who knows, it might even be good enough for the new Uber content being added this league. But first, let's get you there. Now, in the first 3 or 4 acts or so, I actually recommend leveling up using Smite, and you'll find the leveling gem setups in the POB. Even though you do get Shield Crash at level 1, its damage scales with your shield, and shields that early are pretty bad. Once you do transition to Generous Cry plus Shield Crush, the number 0 priority is to get a shield that has as much armor or evasion as possible. Everything else on it is secondary because this is basically your weapon. Also, keep in mind you need corpses to get your red boys out, and before getting your Cyclone and Castile channeling setup going, you can manually cast Desecrate for that. Then there are a couple of other tools that will make your life easier, especially once you start spinning. First, Quicksilver Flasks to offset the movement speed reduction from Cyclone. You get 2 of those from the quests in Act 1 and 2. Then movement speed boots and at least a mana flask. If you can find an enduring mana flask, you're absolutely golden. It doesn't even matter how much it recovers. You can also use a low level clarity aura. If you still find you're struggling with mana, then grab the mana leech node below the Val Pact keystone and that should do the trick. You can respec those points a bit later on. My second suggestion for a League starter is the Skeleton Mage Necromancer, which summons an army of ranged skeletons along with a few other minions who are there to help them out, basically their cheerleaders. While the build lost some DPS from having Elemental Equilibrium Keystone moved on the other side of the tree, we did make up most of it from mastery bonuses and swapping around a couple of gems. On the other hand, minions became a lot more tanky, again thanks to masteries, so Spectres and the Animate Guardian should die far less now, if at all. Now, what makes this build an amazing League starter is first and foremost its complete gear independence. Almost none of your minions' damage comes from equipment, and you don't need any expensive mandatory uniques which are crucial for the build's performance. As long as your resistances are capped, you're good to go and your skeletons will obliterate everything in their path. Even the best in slot endgame gear usually costs less than what most builds need to clear white maps. Skeleton mages are obtained by socketing in a Dead Reckoning unique jewel, which transforms melee skellies into mages. While it is a very common and cheap jewel, you might not get it from literally day 1 of the new league. This build is usually quite popular as a League starter, so demand is also higher for that jewel. That's absolutely no problem, however, as in early game and even up to mid-tier maps, the normal melee skeletons are just as strong as mages. You'll also find the melee skeletons gem setup in the Path of Building guide for the build. Now, the Skeleton Mage Necro is equally good at clearing large packs of mobs as well as killing bosses or other tough targets, and losing a few skeletons will never cripple you as raising some more doesn't require corpses. Not only that, but summoner builds are a beginner's best friend. Similar to Generous Cry, this build allows you to observe and learn difficult fights or a new league's mechanic while your minions do all the heavy lifting. Third one, Viper Strike Pathfinder, the build that single-handedly saved the league for a lot of people that were ready to give up on Path of Exile during the 3.15 nerf apocalypse. So Viper Strike is one of those old school skills that was made for single target, but when using it with melee splash and ancestral call supports, it turns into an almost screen-wide clearing ability. You get Viper Strike at level 1 and, like the majority of chaos damage skills in the game, it gets most of this damage from gem levels and passives rather than gear. This makes it ideal in a new league scenario, as you can save up currency for upgrades once you get to the Atlas. Even then, there is very little competition for the items you'll need in this build. Almost nobody uses claws and most of the best in slot items are fairly common ones. You can easily kill Awakener 8 Cirrus with 2 Wasp Nest claws as your weapons, and those usually cost only a few chaos orbs. The playstyle is also very simple without any complicated combos or gimmicks. You hit stuff and watch it melt in a glorious green cloud, and anything that survives your initial hits will receive additional poison stacks from each nearby enemy that died. And this form of poison proliferation seems to suit the Scourge mechanic pretty well, as you need to clear as many mobs as possible in the least amount of time. Now, to summarize, this build seems to tick all the boxes for a perfect league starter. Very cheap and easy to play, not really gear dependent and without mandatory uniques. The main skill is usable from level 1 and after the nerf apocalypse it actually came up on top. The Pathfinder is also shaping up to be a pretty popular ascendancy class this league, so you can use it to respec later on to other builds. Poison Concoction, for example, could end up being really strong if the skill mechanics are good. Oh yeah, one thing to note here, the POB tool currently still uses the old evasion formula, which is basically half the avoidance we actually get in 3.16. Once the POB guys update the client, I'll likely tweak the passive tree a bit, as we might end up having too much evasion. Anyway, if this sounds like what you're looking for, then check out the full guide by following the link in the pinned comment and video description. Alright, up next is the beast known as Ice Crash Berserker. With extremely satisfying giant ice hits that cover almost half the screen, Ice Crash is not your average melee skill by any means. In fact, it has better coverage and area of effect than many spells, and you can take advantage of this and choose when to fight up close and when to slam from afar, depending on the specifics of each combat scenario. Now, the vast majority of your damage comes from the Ascendancy and regular passives rather than items, which is ideal for the first few weeks of a new league, as you'll have to squeeze out as much as possible from very little currency. The Ascendancy also boosts your overall speed, both movement and attack, making the build an incredibly efficient Atlas farmer without needing any special items. Mobility will also be crucial for the Scourge mechanic, as, again, you need to be able to clear as many mobs as quickly as possible while you're faced into the demonic realm. Gearing up is also really straightforward, and there isn't much competition for the items you'll need in this build. For example, stuffs are not in great demand for whatever reason. Because of this, you should actually be able to get a few of the best in slot gear pieces earlier than usual and then start snowballing. If this sounds like what you're looking for, then check out the full guide by following the link in the pinned comment and video description. And finally, for people that enjoy the straightforward spellcasting action with no weirdness like mines or totems, there's a Freezing Pulse Elementalist. Freezing Pulse is yet another very old skill that even today is still kicking ass and holding strong. Similar to Viper Strike, you get Freezing Pulse at level 1 and the spell has baked in Infinite Pierce plus a very easy way to obtain extra projectiles, making it really efficient for map clearing without sacrificing any damage. This also means you'll have more than enough DPS for the first 10 or so tiers of the Atlas, even on a 5 link. And speaking of maps, once you have your third Ascendancy passive, the build can run all map modes, so you won't be forced to skip or reroll maps, greatly increasing your farming efficiency. In the full guide, I've added both non-cluster and cluster jewels versions for the passive tree, so you can easily start with a cheaper and simpler non-cluster option, and then upgrade once you have enough currency or crafted the jewels yourself. While the build is not an outstanding boss killer, it totally makes up for that by being an amazing farmer and a mapping beast. This can even be your workhorse build that will fund other more exotic projects. And as with most of my builds, Freezing Pulse is also extremely easy to play. You just point and shoot and everything is either frozen or chilled to an almost standstill, allowing you to kill everything from a safe distance. Even many bosses will actually freeze when you land a juicy crit, so in general the build sports a pretty safe playstyle, great for new players and beginners. Gearing is very straightforward as well, with no real mandatory uniques and a high ceiling when it comes to squeezing out every bit of DPS out of this build. The mods you're looking for on items are also pretty intuitive, and as always, the POB contains trade links that will help you shop for the gear. And that about wraps it up for my top 5 recommendations for Scourge League starters. You'll find the links to the full guides in the video description and pinned comment, and each comes with its own updated POB. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on going with either of these, or if you've tried them before as League starter and how did that go. Hope you all have an amazing league and see you on the next guide.